on, you bastard!
Brought to you once again by JPFans, because apparently the universe is absolutely dead set on me completing the Superlink trio. Of course, as per usual, all opinions contained within are my own and not influenced by external factors, such as the fact this figure was given to me as opposed to purchased. It's rare you go into a figure knowing nothing at all. So often, with the infinite access to information we have, you're instantly inundated with every single fact about a release you could possibly imagine. Which show did it derive from? Who made it? What was the context it was released in? And perhaps most pressing, is it actually good or not? While your own stance may go against the grain, the general public can, for the most part, pretty easily be passed. Yeah, I got nothing on this guy. No nostalgic yearnings, no in-depth analyses, not even throwbacks in fanworks. He just exists, and that's all we know about him. I think I can deduce the reason why. It's how he fits into the greater throwback ecosystem. Personally, I really like Bruticus and Superion Maximi as their own things. They're a special type of combiner you just don't see these days. Not to say they're better than many of those outings, but there's nothing quite like an Energon combiner. And what does the current zeitgeist compel you to do? Slap an upgrade kit on them and turn them into their G1 counterparts, because skeleton's bad, I guess? Even when talking about toys 20 years old, it remains impossible to avoid skeleton combiner discourse. Yet again, I find myself back in the building. People really find love for Bruticus Maximus and Superion Maximus through the act of making them more G1. And coincidentally, you can't really do that with Constructicon Maximus. There's not really any kits you can get for him unless someone has made their own on the 3D printed marketplace. Even if you could make upgrade kits, what good would it do? His loadout is so wholly different from G1 Devastator that it would basically be, at least to modernized G1 collectors, no point. He's a combiner that commands engagements on his own terms, and because of that, he remains a time capsule of his era. He resists the urge to recontextualize, and I think that's why nobody really carried the torch in singing his praises. But that's also what made him so intriguing to me specifically. It's so rare I go into a project knowing basically nothing. I know the base context, and I know I love the other two figures, but beyond that, who can say? And apparently, I'm not the only one who hungers for such knowledge. Honestly, it's kind of relieving. Here I was thinking I'd be selfish for using this opportunity to complete the set, but it seems y'all are equally hungry to find out more about this chunky bastard. And I, for one, am more than thrilled to deliver. So, greetings Cybertronians, I'm DrLockdown, and today's diagnosis pertains to the Energon Constructicons and their combined form Constructicon Maximus. Or, I guess more accurately, Buildron, because once again this is the better painted Superlink version, because well, sponsorship and all. In fact, let's just get that message out of the way. Today's video is, somehow once again, brought to you by JPFans. Honestly surprised they asked me back given how long the last video took, but I am very grateful they did. It's no secret that back collecting is on the rise. With the way a lot of mainline is going, many folk, myself included, have taken to back collecting in order to find a more healthy way to engage with the franchise. Sure, you could keep up with the zeitgeist and keep banging your head into the wall with, let's face it, a good chunk of aggressive mediocrity, or you could go back and discover a whole world of other figures with surprisingly refreshing design ideologies. And amongst the plethora of sourcing options to help assist you out there, JPFans is here to make things nice and easy. JPFans is a proxy shipping service helping you source a wide variety of items from Mercari, Amazon Japan, and many more stores. While a lot of these Japanese import figures cost an arm and a leg on Western eBay, given they, well, didn't actually release here, they're significantly cheaper in their domestic aftermarket, and JPFans allows you to purchase them and send them over. It's a better way to get access to a world of figures you might not have otherwise. Even after postage costs, you're still saving yourself a pretty big chunk. Just with the orange idiot doing orange idiot things, try not to use the expensive American shipping options, especially for customers in the US. Stick with ECMS. Might seem like a long while, but this is basically how us Aussies collect on a day-to-day basis. It's not worth the extra cost. And while it's not offered as a free service anymore, you can still opt for them to take photos of your item to ensure it hasn't been damaged by the individual sellers. Again, as I said in the original collaboration, that's not really a service I've seen any freight forwarding service do before. Bloody fantastic. Once again, massive thanks to JPFans for providing this figure and sponsoring this video. Definitely one y'all should take advantage of, especially if you're not feeling the love with a lot of modern figures. Make sure to use the affiliate code on screen if you want to set up an account, as well as the promo code for 20% off shipping if you haven't already. Anywho, that's it from me. Constructicon time! You know, this isn't the first time Hashtag have attempted a more diverse lineup of Constructicons color-wise, or at least a construction-themed combiner. Pretty sure 6-Builder doesn't count as Constructicons unless it's the Universe 2003 release, but even so, it's a pretty vast space to inhabit with many a wacky construction-themed loadout. And for the most part, the Energon Constructicons do that reasonably well. Vehicle-wise, not so much, as outside of the main Steam man himself, they're essentially everything we've seen before. But the decos definitely bring something new to the table, very 2000s and mostly well done. We'll get to some of those issues later. But starting on the streets, just a pat and a beat, bleak past, pleading sleep, dreaming defeat, Sledge definitely feels more jungle green than Constructicon green, and it's a nice change of pace. Again, same as last time, we're using the Western names for the sake of simplicity. If you want a rundown of how we're going to approach this and the reasons why this combiner is the way it is, go watch the previous Bruticus Maximus review. For how contorted and crazy the limbs are, he's surprisingly well put together. Like, these are just the feet back here, and these are blatantly torso pieces, but they really work. Perhaps because these parts are designed as mechanical detail, like making the chest pieces into ladders or adding pistons to the shins to blend in better. For a Scout class figure, it's remarkably clean, especially considering this is probably the most inventive conversion scheme out of any of the limbs. Well, robot to vehicle and back anyway. I don't know if anything can really top the combiner conversion of the helicopter bros. The wheels are super chunky and they spin really well. I miss when shit like this was always guaranteed to be pinned. It's just not the same these days. Though next week's review does return to that, which is always a treat. Wonderful silver hubcaps as well, and that silver is mirrored on the piston sections and the bucket. Speaking of, said bucket is sculpted delightfully. I especially love the stepped etching on the top, not something I've particularly seen on Transformers scoops before, at least in my collection. The Energon star housing is also really well integrated. In fact, while the other molds don't do so as deftly, all around it's some really solid positioning of the spark chip housing. And speaking of housing, the driver cab is really nice. Way in a high-rise mansion, the man Sledge stands at the top throwing laughs. The message comes through in the sense it's pretty high off the ground and is able to get a pretty good view of everything. References to my favorite Sky Blue song aside, it's very nice. Just some simple black framing and a nice green roof on top. Even has a similar dark blue shade to the helicopters in the last set, though it's a little harder to make out in these colors, and thus doesn't quite stand out as well. Still a solid showing all around. In fact, in general, this is a really solid front loader mode. I think given it's a bunch of different greens, it's not as visually interesting as it could be, but it's still done exceptionally. It's the type of vehicle that's very well designed, but not particularly interestingly designed, deco-wise at least. Sculpt-wise, it's genuinely gorgeous, but the deco is more reserved. It's the kind of Takara deco that does what it sets out to do exceptionally, but in a subtler way. It's amazing, but it never really feels like that, which isn't an insult, it's just the way it is. Still, fault-wise, there's not particularly anything I can think of. Oh no, the thighs are visible at the back, on a Scout class figure that also combines. It's fine. If you really must, just cover it up with a combiner kibble. It works well enough. Speaking of, easily the best kibble storage of the combiner bits on any limbot. Fantastic job. And oh no, the scoop hinges from the top instead of the middle, so it always looks slightly off when it has to combine. It's fine. Seriously, it's fine. This is a figure where what you see is what you get. Dig beneath the surface and you'll find a lot of fantastic hidden details, but it still amounts to just a pretty good figure. But in all honesty, that's mostly because its best aspects are hidden in the other parts of the design. For now, it's holding the cards much closer to its chest, waiting to strike. No warning, just punchlines. He's wadded for sunshine. Now, for a member that wears his heart, or cool factors I guess, on his sleeve more, look no further than Bonecrusher. Yes, the only member to take on his G1 name from this set, Hasbro-wise anyway, he provides quite the lovely remix. The main star of the show is easily the new orange we get, with a wonderful metallic finish applied to the whole thing. It's actually a great way to circumvent orange being so difficult to do, applying a reflective fleck to the whole thing. To give it some extra oomph, there's not a lot of it, but where it does show up, it's incredibly beautiful. The driver cab also sticks out a lot better, now using a gunmetal frame, which allows the blue to pop significantly more. Though the trade-off quality-wise is the sand plastic isn't that crisp and rich, and before you ask, yes, sand plastic can have a premium look to it. I literally just had an example of this last week, but nobody f***ing watched it because between it being a third-party figure and on America Day, the YouTube algorithm banished the review to the algorithmic equivalent of Engadine Macca's. This doesn't, but thankfully it doesn't show up enough to become a problem. Thankfully, the orange is splotched over enough this thing to stop it from being an issue. The brown is almost in a similar boat. It's close to staying behind the line and letting the orange do the talking, but unfortunately having the entire ladder section coated in the stuff is a bit too much. Maybe I'd like it better if it were a deeper, richer brown, but it's just okay. Combined with how the lack of pistons make the legs stand out a lot more, this ends up being a significantly worse deco. Still a very lovely scooper mode, but it's a step below. Maybe a few steps along that ladder. into the Engadine Macca's Abyss. Still, the hubcaps are nice, and the gunmetal blends great with the brown, even if I prefer the black from old Holyfield Real Deal over here. Make no mistake, this is still a lovely figure. This is always a problem I run into when talking about similar categories between figures, primarily discussing the minute changes between the two. Just because one is worse doesn't mean it's bad, or even that I'm disappointed by them. Well, in some cases I certainly am, but this isn't one of those cases by any means. It is a decent front loader, just not as good as his mold mate. And that's okay, there's always going to be a figure like that between redecos. Long as one of them isn't actively awful in its coloration, you're doing alright. So hopefully up next they can keep things oh dear. Yeah, once we get to the crane, guys, things start to take a bit of a nosedive. To a point, I get it. Scout class figures are under a lot of restrictions. It's about as small as you can get without expecting Legends-esque compromises, so having a few f***y bits here and there sorta makes sense. But by the same token, none of the other limbots have this issue, period. This has got to be the weakest vehicle mode of any limb from the Energon toy line. No contest. And it's a real shame because the deco here is absolutely gorgeous. Not really appropriate for the name Duststorm, and I think the two should have had their names switched, to be honest, but it's really well done. The front is gorgeous, kind of a predecessor to animated Ultra Magnus with its angled front and gorgeous two-tone blue. The subtle striping around the edges is carefully picked out and quite lovely, even if it's a little difficult to see against the navy. You don't really need it though, considering the yellow and red paints are already gorgeous. I really should get around to explaining why, because I did actually ask someone knowledgeable about how the whole thing works. Perhaps another time, weekly uploads make things a smidge difficult. Nevertheless, the paint is done exceptionally well, and in general, the whole front section is. And that's where my praise really stops. Once you get past the cab section of the front with its gorgeous pastel blue paint, he really falls apart. The entire back half is just an absolute joke. It's really like they just gave up here and it makes no sense. The thighs are blatantly visible, making essentially no attempt to blend in with anything. Like, at least make them boxier? To fit in with the aesthetic? No. And that's not even the worst part. There's no locking tabs here whatsoever. The only part keeping this whole section intact is one tiny connection port at the top. It's solid enough, make no mistake, but this can't be enough, can it? You need more around the edges, more panels slipping out and keeping the thing cohesive. Scout class, schmout class, give us something better! The crane housing section isn't much better. You've got visible head syndrome that's arguably worse than Barricade from last time, because the coloration stands out a lot more. The cab section never quite lines up and looks really small due to how it transforms. Yes, it's painted exceptionally, as is the winch, but when it's a mess of clearly folded up arms, it just doesn't particularly come across well. Yes, this would absolutely be fine for a Scout class figure of this era, but with everything else, yeah, nah, not cutting it any slack. And what's really frustrating is that they engineered in a proper swivel and everything, and even an extension, so you get all the articulation you could possibly want. But to do so, you have to untab the whole thing and return to the annoying lack of tabs on the thigh sections. You're stuck choosing between lacking solidity or lacking articulation, neither of which look very good, and are also further exacerbated by the lacking detail on the crane. Like, the extended part looks cool, but what is this nonsense at the base? It looks so incredibly unfocused and daft. I don't know what they were going for here at all. And what's this all for anyway? It's not like it undergoes some crazy conversion to get to combine mode, like the Helicopter Bros did last video. All it really does is plonk on as is without any conversion whatsoever. It's just so frustrating because I can see a truly brilliant figure under the surface and it's just squandered. The only saving grace here is that the combiner kibble storage is some of the most fun I've seen in this toy line. The claw accessory is genuinely lovely. It's giving Earthrise grapple with the claw clipping over the crane. Now, is it a better weapon than what we saw last week? Obviously no, the tanks easily have it beat, but it is incredibly fun and whimsical and I kinda love it. Enough to say this alternate mode? No, sadly, but at least enough to say the experience isn't completely devoid of joy. Duststorm is a bit of a letdown. An alt mode this genuinely awesome really deserves the tender love and care to make it really shine, and it's just not given such. It feels like they had some much cooler ideas here, like adding a locking mechanism in the knees or filling in with the torso piece, but none of that materializes, unfortunately. You're just left with an alternate mode that looks fantastic, but feels very underwhelming. So what happens when you remove even the looks and give up on the figure entirely? Well, you get the Blight of this set. Actually, that's an insult to Blight because at least his base molds was damn solid. This here, yep, we found it. The worst combiner limb of this toy line. There's just no contest. It's genuinely abysmal here. And it's really frustrating because for Wideload, there's so much here that works insanely well. The green, gorgeous. The metallic orange windows, drawing from Bonecrusher's deco, fantastic. No notes. Even the gunmetal cap section is an absolute delight. And I really wish there was more of it on display. But that's just the thing. There isn't. Instead, you get this sickly shade of grey, an unholy chimera of Games Workshop grey and sun damage. Except, this was a new figure, one that's never seen the sunlight. It comes pre-yellowed, it's just how the shade works. Forget all of the existing issues, even though they're still here, it just pales in comparison to the abominable color choices. Had this gone for a different shade, like maybe a black or even a more stark grey, it wouldn't have been as bad, but no, the deco not only looks bad, but actively makes all of the worst parts from Duststorm look even worse. Is this going to be another case where I end up buying the Hasbro version just to make the combined mode look better? Probably not, as I already ran into issues with cohesiveness the last time I tried to do that. But I shouldn't even be considering such. This should have just been better from the outset. This figure is just annoying because I feel like I should have more to say, but I just don't. It's basically all of the issues with Duststorm with a side of bad deco. It's the same reason the SS86 Springer video was a lot shorter than it would have been otherwise. I've already gone over all the main issues and all that's left is deco bad. And it's not even deco bad, it's one shade of the deco bad. And had they changed that one part, this wouldn't have been good per se, but it certainly would have gained a little more favor. And I suppose that leaves us with the main man himself, Steamhammer, and he's good. Not amazing, but definitely good. Much like Barricade, this guy's pretty much a robot and a torso first, and a vehicle mode second. Though arguably, he pulls it off a lot better without the exposed combiny bits. The way they're hidden is actually quite clever, as is the use of arms. Using the left arm as a scoop is a really cool idea, and in theory, everything ends up in super unique and creative places. In practice, this is a bunch of limbs folded up, but it's definitely a cool bunch of limbs folded up. It does so with panache, so at least it gets the looks down pat. The driver cab section looks gorgeous in this green and orange combo, a nice deviation from the traditional Constructicon mix. Though you do get a hint of purple up the top near the Minicon parts, which work about as well as you'd expect. The scoop might not be sculpted that crazily, but it more than makes up for it with the silver paint slathered over the whole thing. They've even dotted all the pistons across the arm, which don't come across from a distance but look super cool up close. Great place for the Energon star storage too, and not upside down for once. And since this is a mining digger, you can also open it at the bottom to simulate what the real, or real-ish, vehicle would do. My only gripe is that there's no solid locking point for this, and it can often swivel too far to the side, though part of that's QC on my copy. Annoyingly, this joint was cracked out of the box and I've had to repair it. Sealed too, so it was definitely a factory error. And for such an expensive figure too, bummer. The tread section is absolutely adorable, tiny and painted crisply. He balances surprisingly well on it, and between this and the scoop, you get a nice bit of articulation. While this mode clearly isn't the priority, they've absolutely given a lot of thought to how everything would go. I mean, even the legs at the back aren't that heinous. They're absolutely just legs with thighs and pelvis in full view and tiny ass panels barely keeping the cohesion together. But I mean, it's a deluxe combiner torso that's already doing a lot. And hey, the exposed head on Barry was way worse, and I gave that a pass. Overall, it's a fun mining scoop. It's not amazing, but it's definitely a good time. I definitely think Steamhammer-wise, I'm personally more into the Power Core Combiners version, though a lot of that is nostalgia, and these two don't really share much outside of a name and a general construction / construct icon vibe. Also, let me know if you want me to cover any Power Core Combiners stuff in the comments. It's a super interesting period of Transformers that I have a lot to say about, so sound off if you'd like to see me cover it. Steamhammer Scooper is definitely an alternate mode that I had to take my time warming up to, but I'm really glad I did in the end, because there's a lot of fun to be had here. Sure, fun doesn't quite pay the scoreboard bills, but it does do a lot to endear me to him. And ultimately, I'd say these 5 make a decent set. 3 out of 5 members are genuinely a great time, and for all the kerfuffles with Duststorm, the deco does do a lot to help him look good in a group shot. Really, it's just Wideload is the only one letting the team down, and every combiner has a worst member, and it's still better than some other combiner members I've covered in the past. Better than Blight? The deco is, but the figure less so. But the point is, the vehicles as a whole unit are still a good time. That's not me saying I'm fine with 2 of the members being undercooked, that's just me saying for what they had, they did a good job. Now, especially compared to the previous Gestalt we covered in this line, these seem mostly pedestrian. 3 out of 5 are a lot simpler than what I've covered pretty much last month. Or was it 2 months ago? I'm not really sure. Time flies when you're uploading weekly. But in 2 specific circumstances, they really pull out the stops and go crazy. And with these circumstances, these might be some of the best Scout class figures I've ever managed to transform before, so they're a great time. Untab these wheels from the side and retab them on there so that you can untab the legs in a moment. That'll have them nice and out of the way and allow you to extend them like so. Rotate back this scoop, rotate up these wheels all the way back like so we've got clearance for everything else. Now this is the really cool part. You want to take this entire section and fold it in on itself, then fold it in on itself again and click into place. Rotate the waist 180 degrees. Take these chest pieces and rotate them down into place like so. Bring out the arms like so. You can then bring the wheels back into place and rotate the bucket over itself so that it becomes a nice tidy backpack. The fact that these two basically fold inside out to get these really nice and wide torsos is honestly insane. They're easily the most fun I've had at this price point in the Energon toy line, and certainly the best Gestalt transformations I've seen in this sort of trilogy of combiners. So yeah, fan-tastic. No notes on the conversion, it's just brilliant. Unfortunately, I cannot say the same for the Crane brothers. Duststorm and Wideload are just really undercooked in all the ways you would expect. I don't know what to tell you, it's just everything you'd expect it to be. Separate the man-hook hand car door from this little part here and that'll fold in. Rotate this top section 180 degrees. Take this top section and fold it down. Take these panels and start to rotate them around and also unfold the arms as you go so you can basically just fold these together. I feel like this whole inside-out folding thing would have been really amazing if the parts were a lot chunkier, but they're not. They're quite wispy. They're very thin and very rickety, so it just doesn't have that fun factor you'd really want from this. Anyway, you want to rotate the head into the back and then sit it there, and it'll all kind of sit in place there, not very solidly. And then last but not least, you basically take the heels out and the feet out and separate the legs, and you are done. Hypothetically, really fun conversions. In practice, just kind of undercooked. Again, it's all in the thighs. If they just had extra panels that would fold around and make the entire middle sections feel more solid, these would be much better conversions overall and much better transformers overall, but they just don't. There had to have been some budget kerfuffles going on here. There just had to have been. And that just leaves Steamhammer, who's about as simple as you'd expect, but there is one caveat that some of you may be waiting to comment this, probably waiting to say, oh, what about the misassembly? What about the misassembly? Well, I'm actually about to show you that now. But first, let's just bring these panels down, untab these panels from the side, and clip them into the sides of the legs. They're octagonal hinges, so they should lock in place without actually tabbing in. Would be nice if they could tab in, but it's alright. Bring up the knees like so. You don't need to do any accordioning on these, it's just the way it is. You basically just rotate this upwards so that the head cavity is facing up like that. This section rotates down like that, and these will rotate into there, but where are the tabs? Why are the tabs up here, but these are down here? Well, as it turns out, Steamhammer has a very common misassembly issue. Yes, for whatever reason, these treads are usually assembled backwards. This is how it is stock, when really these tabs should be down here so that this can lock the whole torso into place. So if you'll allow me the Warbitron screwdriver, real ones will know where this is from, you can actually unscrew these sections and screw them into the right place. It is so piss easy that I'm literally just going to do this on screen right now. These will just gently pop out there. Take out this side here and this side here. Gently out so we don't lose the screws, and then this one will just go onto this side. Like so. Rescrew everything in place. Come on. And then this section goes back on the other side. So basically, we've swapped them around so that the tabs are on the bottom. And then you'll notice that this will actually tab together and lock the entire torso into place. And you'll still have access to the head at the bottom there, which will fold up and do its thing. So yeah, it's a bit of a weird misassembly issue, but hey, it works in the end. Anywho, last but not least, these just kind of use their octagonal hinges to sit back in place there. The legs will rotate forward like so, and the arms will rotate outwards like so. Nice and simple, and you're done. Don't forget me, you're done. Misassembly of the whole torso section aside, it's a pretty fun conversion. Definitely a limbs crumpled up randomly kind of conversion, but still pretty good. I'd even say it's a better version than Barricade, and kind of by default it's a better conversion than Stormjets. Also, you can kind of fold this around however you like. I kind of like having it down like that, but you know, it's up to you. Oh, and I always forget something. I forgot the feet. I was so focused on the misassembly, I forgot the feet, because of course I did. Whoops. So yeah, ultimately, decent conversions aside from those two. Actually, to be fair, their conversions are kind of fine. Underwhelming, yes, but fine. But they do pale in comparison to the front-loaded brothers, and Steamhammer himself is still a pretty good transformation as well. I guess I've definitely handled worse combiners. This is still a pretty fun set. And definitely a nice bunch of toys that you can flip back and forth pretty easily, as is the hallmark of the Unicron trilogy, I suppose. In robot mode, these lads are definitely more 2000s-y than the last batch of members. Those ones were already pretty firmly placed in their era, but these definitely feel more at home in the middle of a giant Plarail set with some tokusatsu playing in the background. Part of that gives them their charm, but part of that also gives them their jank. But starting off, Sledge serves the scrolls full of gold because this is one gorgeous robot mode. Never mind the awesome transformation to get here, as awesome as it is, he's just awesome on his own. His head sculpt is lovely, almost a friendlier version of Armada Demolisher, and I guess definitely friendlier than the other major Demolisher in the franchise by default. He looks so fresh-faced underneath his soldier helmet, and the orange highlights are a real treat. Plus the light piping is just divine. In fact, once again, these all have bloody fantastic light piping. Though I think that's a constant with the whole lineup, to be fair, so perhaps it's not that surprising. The torso might seem wide and flat at first, but they've actually hidden a lot of extra details under the surface. You've got more orange highlights joined by the new silver that even provides some support from behind the main panel. I'd personally have loved some extra paint on the midriff, but I suspect this whole section is unpaintable plastic. So they make do with a sculpted Decepticon symbol. A gorgeous sculpted Decepticon symbol. This whole section is a real treat. I reckon the fact it's a bunch of different parts coming together instead of one giant chunk really adds to the whole constructed vibe they've got going. Then you bring in the extra paint on the limbs, especially waist down, and he really comes to life. The pelvis lights up with a wonderful triple tone of base dark green and additional black and lime. And the shins go even further with the extra silver. You quickly realize the entire reason the vehicle mode did things the way it did was to make these look gorgeous. And I think it was a wonderful way to make both modes look killer. And while the arms don't get as much, the silver fists are very much appreciated. They look a bit messy when covered in shadow, but up close you can see it couldn't be further from the truth. They're crisp, as is the rest of the paint here. Takara really don't fuck around, absolutely not. Overall, it's a delightful robot mode, chunky and blocky, almost Wild King-esque with how he looks like a glorified Lego brick. He's chunky, but very dynamic, and that gives him some lovely appeal. Though, regrettably, he's not without flaw. There's definitely parts that could have used some TLC. The backpack section is almost there, the wheels folded back further, letting them not get stuck on the arms as much. It would have done a lot better. And the real sticking point is the cab section just hanging out the back. It's just in that middle ground between intentional and random janky kibble. I get the limitations of the price point, but this is still a bit jank. Somewhat of a shame, but it's easy enough to get over, I suppose, given the era. Similar case with the wheels, they're a bit far forward and occasionally eclipse the shin detail at the right, or I guess wrong, angles. Not hateful and easily less annoying than the backpack, but it's a thing. The weapon also stinks. It's very clearly just a combiner appendage, awkwardly folded around to approximate a digging claw. It's probably the worst combiner appendage of the line. Even makes the hand-foot guns from a decade later look genuinely fantastic. But, it's combiner kibble, tons of cases where it does even less convincing stuff. So it's fine. In fact, none of these are issues that actively bug me anyway. For that, we've got just one, the articulation. As cool as the waist swivel is a staple of these combiner members, thankfully, he doesn't have any bicep swivel. Not even a ball joint there, just a hinge. It's kind of frustrating. It's so close to being incredibly nimble, occupying the same space as something like Universe Roadbuster, but he just feels like he falls short. Though, in retrospect, that figure wasn't actually as crazy as this one, with less articulation overall. Yet he feels like the opposite. It's quite odd. I think it's because the Chunkitude isn't as exaggerated. He fits into this weird middle ground, and I just feel a bicep swivel would have helped him overcome that. Still, this is one awesome castle-crashing, button-mashing robot mode. It may pull back in a few key areas, and I still think the helicopters are the highlight of the limb molds, but they did a lot with this design. With a little more than pennies, they worked through some damn good thoughts and delivered an awesome loadout that feels perfectly placed in its period. He's a good chunkster. Not the best chunkster, but a damn good chunkster nonetheless. So, predictably, Bonecrusher does that. But again, it's an interesting case. It's a pretty good robot mode, and you can tell they've tried their damnedest to make it even better than the last one. You finally understand that here they've prioritized this mode over the vehicle mode, whereas Sledge was more of a balance. All of that hidden orange and plenty of the other sections are also brought to the forefront, and hypothetically it would all be way better. Like, the torso is way better segmented with some crisp as f orange and the two-tone brown and sand popping way harder in the middle. Also fits the unpainted grille much better, though I do miss the silver stripes as it made this section feel way more purposeful. The metallic orange remains gorgeous on the forearms and shins, and they go extra hard around the feet with extra gunmetal. Not so sure about the giant orange pelvis, but hey, some folks have gotta love it. Not my personal aesthetic taste, but hey, it was Pride Month recently. Maybe someone had their awakening due to an old scout class like this. Though maybe not in these colors. It's really trying to do well, but the brown and sand is just not pulling its weight. Granted, we've seen in last week's review, it's a really difficult color combo to get right without a finish placed on top. But even with the Takara paint budget, it's not particularly something they're afforded. Like all over, but especially with the next section, the sand just cuts through way too much. Doesn't help that the orange doesn't blend particularly well, but still, it's just an deco. Maybe had they cranked up the purple a bit, it's good where it's applied, but there's not particularly a lot here. It's tough because they have to be careful with the coloration to keep a through line for the combination. But even so, this is definitely a weaker deco. Not enough to make me want to go out and find the Hasbro one, but definitely weaker. But make no mistake, the deco isn't bad, not even mediocre. It's fine. It's perfectly serviceable. It's just next to Sledge, it seems far less good. I know when I review redecos and retools on their own, it makes the existing pros and cons much more difficult to convey because how do you do that without repeating yourself? This is one of those cases. He is a very simple figure discussion-wise, and that makes it hard to convey the cromulence. He's good, make no mistake, but to be honest, no one defeats the Sledge. Though I guess simplicity is better than whatever Duststorm is going on. Fortunately, this is a massive step up when compared to the vehicle, but is definitely a bit weird. This is a design that feels like they wanted to do more than it actually ended up doing, slamming headfirst into the budget like a coyote on a painted wall. I do adore the legs though, or at least the lower legs. You get all of that gorgeous paint front and center, and it really has a lovely angled feel to it with the way the cab section steps out of the general chunk. Unfortunately, a smidge hollow from the back, and I'm not sure why, considering they don't particularly fold up like any of the other limb bots do. Nothing needs to go here. So why? Still, good shins. Sadly, the thighs are way too short for this shit, and they don't have any swivel whatsoever. But the bottom half is alright. They just had to have cut the budget here, right? Unfortunately, the rest is not that great, not terrible either, but it's just so gimped in everything it wants to do. The torso is reasonably sculpted with some nice armoring and even some diamond plating. Unfortunately, it's impossible to see anything with this case in unpainted plastic, which seems to be an unfortunate running theme with this set. Not really a good idea. Like, this is where you want the most paint, not the least, right? At least the midriff gets some, and it is lovely, but why is the con symbol on his crotch? What is with this set and I
discovered an entire box of spells about
The arms are fine. I like the crane use, though it does feel like it should be able to shorten a bit or at least swivel upwards. It's so long he can't really straighten his arm out, which is annoying, but hey, scout class. It's understandable. His right arm, though, God, this is hollow. Not even any extra paint on show, like the last set. Just, it's a pipe and fist scooped out of a cab section. It feels so underdone compared to what we've seen before, and knowing the heights this set can reach, it's a real shame. Even the head is quite nondescript, but maybe part of that's thanks thanks to the massive neck plating holding it on top. The whole thing feels very weirdly proportioned, like a half-cooked mud flap from the toy line afterwards. It's like this was the unfinished prototype before they came back to the design later and did this justice. Of course, this is a combiner and there's going to be compromises, but even then I don't think any of the other group members were this compromised. Even the articulation is lacking with, once again, no thigh swivel. It's definitely better than no bicep swivel and it's able to do a lot more, but considering how compromised the legs are, it just feels like they cut the budget from this at some point. This is a figure that reeks of budgeting in a way that no other member has. Even the weapon is just kinda there, though given how it integrates into the vehicle mode, it's a lot more understandable than the stupid claw thingo. Though I guess a pincer is still a type of claw, but still, it's fine. Could be better, but certainly could be worse. This figure isn't bad, but it's definitely on the cusp of it. It's a really cool design under the surface, but it just doesn't have the gumption and especially the budget to make it work. This is definitely a release that makes more sense as the part of a greater whole, more so than its own original thing, which makes the Superlink version a bit safer as you can't buy this on its own usually. Can't buy it much anyway given the Toys R Us exclusivity nonsense, but you get the idea. But no, not a bad figure, easily the worst mold of the entire lineup, but not the worst figure. If you want that, you gotta take a Wideload. How would that even work? This innuendo makes no sense. This is just a shameful showing. Already this mold was super janky, but this is a level below. Again, the legs are really good. The black paint looks like construction boots, which really fits the aesthetic well, and the yellow lights really pop. But once you get past those, it's a sea of sun-damaged grey. All of the lacking sections on Duststorm have their shittiness amplified with the shade. Yes, you can see the detail better, but at what cost? Look at this. Seriously, look at this! And you don't even get the painted midriff anymore because the paint was reallocated to... where was it reallocated to? Why did they skip this? Was it the head? The head that now looks even more out of place with the shades they've gotten on top. It would have been fine if there were more black elsewhere on the body, but because there isn't, and because of the neck nonsense, he looks like he's wearing a beanie and a turtleneck. This is just... no, just no. Unlike Bonecrusher, this is the opposite reason for wishing I could talk about it more. Just to convey how icky this thing looks. Then you combine this nonsense with how stupid everything else is, and this easily takes the top of the podium for the worst Gestalt member in Superlink. Can't speak for combiners overall, as most of the line was built on combining, but definitely out of the 3 Gestalt sets. It's just the perfect storm of bad mold, bad budgeting, bad solidity, and bad deco ideas. Of course, every combiner has a worst member, and the shittiness here isn't enough to ruin the set. And hey, I have covered way worse members on this channel before, even this year. But even so, yeah, this is a low point. This is a real low point. Fortunately, we do end on a good note because Steamhammer brings things back a lot better. This is the quintessential Unicron trilogy grunts, the perfect balance of meanness and goofiness. Apparently that was his role in the show too. I haven't seen it, but I got a pretty good rundown from Ron Bondejon. They've got their own Bruticus video recently, and what do you mean they did a Bruticus Maximus in even more G1 colors? Since when did I know of a toy's existence? Am I out of touch? The head is lovely with adorable bug eyes and crisp orange paint. The orange paint has been a great showing all around, and this is no exception. There's a lot of it on show, and this so easily could have come across as slapdash, but they've done really well. He's even got hidden guns on the sides of the helmets, or are they headlamps? Probably headlamps, given he's, well, you know. I do wish it had better posing as it's sort of stuck in the tread section, though I don't know how they would have done this better. And they did try. There is a swivel in there, it just doesn't work. Thankfully, the arms get a decent amount of posability, though the scoop arm does have to be oriented this way to get the full 90 at the elbow. Not too bad a trade-off though, as it places the painted pistons front and center. Does make the scoop arm look a smidge daft backwards, but you get the claw functionality thanks to the mining dumping motion from vehicle mode. And I still love how asymmetrical he is. It's not often you get designs like this really playing with all the parts on the limbs. The main alternative example I can think of is the Revenge of the Fallen versions, but this probably helped lay some of the groundwork for them. And the other arm is no slouch either. Most of the paint keeps to the shoulder, but between the breakup from the elbow joint and the crisp mechanical detail, it still works quite well. Fun place to put the combiner kibble as well. It's so rare to get such cool kibble usage these days. Not even the movie designs do it. It's also sanitized, and I really miss stuff like this. I quite like the way the legs are done with their killer black shin detail that comes across like a mix of treads and speakers. Part of me wishes he'd have chunkier feet, as they don't really fit the design overall, but they're hella sturdy nonetheless, even without the extra struts at the back. You can fold out the vehicle panels if you really want to, but they don't particularly accomplish much, as the legs are also wonderfully proportioned back here. Here's going nowhere with these stompers. And yes, much like the previous barricade, he does have some hollowness on show, but I never really considered those to be an issue, to be honest. And unlike barricade, he has a much sturdier knee connection, so these ain't going nowhere. Between him and Stormjet, maybe the purple stands for rigidity? Lovely shade, by the way. Love to see it all over this thing, though that does bring me to my main gripe. The chest plate is a bit flat. Well, that and the shoulder QC, but I doubt that will affect most copies. That's what you get for buying figures sealed. You just won't know until it arrives, and given the age of the figure, there's not particularly any resource for a quality control breakage like this. I fully understand the torso though. The cabin scoop section has to fold over, so it can't stick out too much. But even so, there's so much implied depth, and I just would have loved to see it in person. Like, this torso section is monolithic. So much gorgeous purple with the red and silver studded in. It's absolutely delish. I just wish it was bigger, chunkier, and stuck out more. I know people are getting tired of the egg jokes, but like, this seems like the perfect application for extra progesterone. It also unfortunately means that a scepter badge and silver on the midriff stick out a lot further than they should. These are lovely details, genuinely fantastic, but these feel like these would be better suited as secondary ones under a much bigger torso. Still, that was unfortunately never going to happen considering, well, deluxe price point. And the fact the biggest flaw, again, quality control aside, is that I want more out of an already great design is honestly quite commendable. It's a really fun aesthetic, maybe not as well refined as Barricade, but definitely more engaging overall. A lot of that does boil down to the more appealing colors, but even then, they did good here. And he's got the posing to back it up too. This guy remains as limber as the last torso we covered, so you can really get some good moves out of him. The design doesn't quite lend itself to posing as well, as it's a lot more stocky and rigid, which is a shame given his delightful butterfly joints carried over from the conversion, but still, this is a nice amount for a modern deluxe and an exceptional amount for one that's 20 years old. If you really want to, you can even untab the hip skirts and access an extra ab crunch, but honestly, much like the butterflies, I don't think it particularly does much. And yet, you don't really need that extra joint to have fun. This is just a nicely designed grunt member to add to any Decepticon rank. And given the aesthetic prowess shared across these, those ranks can be anything from most periods, really. He's definitely the most devastator of the bunch, but he never feels exactly in that category. He carries his own presence, his own vibe that you just don't get anywhere else. And that's something that's sorely missing these days. I do wish I knew what that big gaping hole in his chest was for, though. It's just kinda there. Okay, I guess. So where does that leave this set? Well, we've got 3 genuinely great members, 1 disappointing one, and 1, well, that. Honestly, that's not a bad showing. It's still better than a lot of combiners out there on the market. And again, especially given the age of this figure, they've done remarkably well for the time. Can these stand in as any forms of modern versions of the G1 Constructicons? F*** no. But honestly, why would you want that? Even at their worst, the style they go for is enough to catch your attention. If you want these for themselves, you're in for a great time. And even if you're just trying to complete the lineup, they're also a really fun time. But of course, that's only part of the story. There's still a big chunk to go over, so with that out of the way, I think it's time for what many would consider the main event. With that all done, please don't allow me to recreate any of the voice lines from any of the Transformers shows ever again. If that whole egg joke thing I make was actually accurate, God, I would be terrible at voice training. The transformation here is a lot more understated than the last one I took a look at. It's actually quite efficient with the way everything folds into Steamhammer specifically, but it does seem a lot more pedestrian when you realize none of these limbs really do anything. Yeah, they all pretty much just stay exactly the way they are, which is fine. I guess they put all of their specs into the robot-to-vehicle transformations, which didn't really work out for the 2 cranes, sadly. Though there is a little bit of transformation on Wideload. You want to separate the crane there and bring out the feet as if you were transforming the legs like so, but we're not going to do that. Instead, we're going to take a look at this little part here, and you'll notice that there's a port on the other side here. This is completely useless. This is where the actual port is. You take one of the pincers, you'll notice there's actually a peg on the end of it. You want to take the peg on the end, not the one that's at the base, and just put that there, and it'll line up here, and then you'll take the other peg there, and the crane will peg into that, creating, I guess, a foot. Doesn't really do it very well, aside from looking really jank. There's also the fact that it just flat out does that if you put enough weight on it, which doesn't really affect the combine mode in this instance, but you know, leave it on a shelf for enough and it will break down. Kinda glad this was sealed, as it's about as strong as it ever would be. But otherwise, yeah, this is not the best leg. Fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on who you ask, the rest basically just plug in their combiner kibble and call it a day. Like, there we go, that is Duststorm done. Oh, no one can defeat the Sledge? Well, apparently combination can. You just basically peg in the combiner kibble, then bring out the claw 4, and you're done. And then of course Scavenger is basically the same, just peg in the combiner kibble. You don't even have to bring anything out on that because it's just a foot, although you do kind of want to make sure these have access to the combiner ports. Just makes things a little bit better. And I guess that leaves us with Steamhammer. Might as well start with the legs by folding in the feet, bringing up the legs on the same accordion structure that Barricade had. Nice and clickly. Adding Lee onto the end of sentences is something my partner does. I've kind of taken on a lot of their vocabulary. Whoopsie daisy. You want to untab the side skirts and bring them all the way down like so. Fold the head away like you would for the vehicle mode transformation. Rotate this section down and bring this section out. You've got 2 pegs here and they'll peg into the way the arms work. Notice the standard arm has a port there, so that will all accordion in on itself with the head going out of the way. Just like so. You kind of want to make sure the double hinge is down so that it gets in there nice and solidly. And the port for the scoop arm is there and it basically does the same thing. Just make sure you keep the scoop down so that there's enough clearance, and it should all peg together like so. And it all comes together. The head will then go into place like so. You've got an additional port there that'll go into that peg there like so. That kind of makes that stray minicon port make so much more sense. It's more of a combiner peg, and it's just there for extra stability. But now you've got an extra port there, an extra peg there, and that'll all peg together. And that's basically Buildron done. The only other thing you really want to do is bring up the head panel like so. Nice and easy. Also, and I did kind of do an awkward edit to make sure it went properly, make sure this doesn't peg into the screw hole by accident. Make sure it actually goes into the right one there. Anywho, once that is done, it all just comes together nice and solidly. And once that's all together, you can even make a nice little kneecap for Scavenger. Don't really need to worry about that with Sledge though, he just kind of works. And last but not least, you kind of have to do that at an angle just so it gets out of the way of the scoop. But that basically does it. I'm not going to pretend this is the most amazing combination ever, but it is quite fun. Most of it just boils down to plugging everything in, and sometimes combinations like that just work really well. Yes, I do kind of wish the limbs exhibited some of the crazy, wacky engineering that their individual robot modes had, but we have Bruticus Maximus for that, so that's kind of covering it for me. Everything else is just a nice, solid Constructicon combiner, and yeah, that might not be on the level that a lot of people are hoping for, but it is quite fun. And there he is, easily the most unique of the Energon combiners. Exhibiting the furthest disconnect from his G1 source, he is more like a giant tokusatsu mech that just happens to be Transformers adjacent. Which, yeah, there's a few gestalts like that, but there's just something about him that defies most of the previous combiner logic. He doesn't even follow the same naming conventions. You either have a wholly original name in Japanese compared to the 2G1 reimaginings, or you've got the team member name with Maximus chucked on the end. The latter one sounds more like a trademark thing, but still it's a figure that stands out among the crowd, instantly making a name for itself. No pun intended. Of course, unique doesn't necessarily mean good, it doesn't mean bad either, but this guy's definitely got some jank in the trank. Sometimes it leans into it, others not so much. Like the head sculpt, this is honestly gorgeous. The glowing blue eyes, the orange and silver crown, the bearded scowl, it's all a fantastic design that's covered entirely in cab kibble. Between that and the giant neck platform, it often looks like he's wearing a scarf. Not as bad as the turtleneck crane members, but still. Hell, the scoop on the side could work as the end of said scarf, tufting away. Speaking of, I love this aesthetic cue. It really helps bring back the asymmetry and gives his left side something visually interesting. And with Duststorm being the way he is, he really needs it. Okay, maybe that's too harsh. The crane mold actually does pretty well as an arm. Sure, it would have been better with some extra filling, but the claw aesthetic actually works reasonably well. Less so as a leg though, like even ignoring how haphazard everything sticks out, it's just not solid. After enough transformations, this is just asking for a total collapse. Thankfully, the front loaders make fantastic limbs, nice and chunky and incredibly well proportioned. Even the appendages work great, arguably the best of the whole lineup, in both hand and foot mode. Maybe that's thanks to them sacrificing the weapon functionality, but honestly, that should really be the least important mode for digit parts. One day I'd still like to be able to make some upgrades that give the others elbows though, without completely changing the loadout and design to be more G1. Maybe when I eventually settle down with a good Christian NB, start a family of Tamagotchis, and we get a 3D printer. But for now, these do well. Even the super jank cranes. And hey, the color balance is really cool. In anime accurate mode, despite the entire right side being green, it never feels overwhelming, probably because it's 3 distinct shades. And the orange and blue really help break things up remarkably well. It helps that Bonecrusher mostly just shows his orange off given the way he's oriented, but hey, whether a happy accident or an intentional placement, it and the rest of the colors work really well. And hey, anything to draw your attention away from Wideload is certainly a plus. Of course, this is still the same set, marred by the same overambition and limitations. Plenty of parts still slam head first into jank beyond what I've already mentioned. You've of course got the articulation issues with the elbows, which was discussed last time, and that's about as annoying as it was there. If this is a deal breaker for you, these aren't the sorts of combiners for you. It's not for me, and if you're like me, it'll be a weird quirk of the era. Not something to excuse, but definitely something that's more funny in hindsight than... However, there's interestingly a way to get around it this time, a fan mode that's exclusive to Constructicon Maximus. Through some minor transformation on Sledge and some more extravagant stuff on Duststorm, you can actually give Constructicon Maximus proper elbows and one bicep swivel. Just one, but hey, this is genuinely cool. Sure, this does mean the head is now in full view of his left shoulder and the right elbow doesn't quite go all the way, but this actually works a real treat. Now, is this worth it? Well, yes and no. In a vacuum, this is absolutely a delightful addition, but Buildron isn't the kind of combiner that's ever experienced in a vacuum. If my assumptions are correct, most people will buy this in a set with the other two Gestalts. Very few collectors will be buying Constructicon Maximus on his own, and in that context, this makes him stand out far too much from the other two. So as cool as it is, it's not particularly a fan mode I use a lot. Of course, if this doesn't bother you, go right ahead. I can't find anything to fault here, even the hollowness on the inside of Duststorm's wrist is fine, and you can always turn it the other way, though sadly it does make it look far less natural. For me, it's just something that takes it too far from the essence of the original, and as such, it's not something I particularly engage with. I'd have much preferred it if they all had dedicated elbow joints, or some workaround to add to them, one that doesn't G1ify them as well. But hey, one day, and for now, this works. Unfortunately, there's also the other articulation issues, the ones that are more design flaws that are also specific to this Gestalt. With the previous review, you could see a subtle click in the thigh and shoulder rotation, sort of like a softer version of what Combiner Wars did. And this can still be felt in the arms, albeit a little looser. Not hateful though, not like the knees. These just don't click at the swivel, leading to them being extra loose. It only affects Wideload half the time, but poor old Bonecrusher flops no matter what you do. It's really annoying, not so bad that the figure will crumble under its own weight as it's just lateral movement, but it really messes with the hand feel. He'll still stand up reasonably well, though perhaps that's all he'll do, considering the other issue. Yeah, the minicon pegs just clash with the waist. He can't move his legs forward past a single click, which is really frustrating. They're so dead set on having the pegs on both of the Decepticon teams in this specific spot, when they really should have fallen more in line with Superion Maximus, because there's just no room at the waist here. Even with the extra arm pose ability, this ends up really gimping his articulation, and it's a real bummer. This had the potential to be the most expressive combiner of the set, and instead it just falls a bit short. Combined with the floppy thighs, the hand feel really betrays him. Also, hip skirts above the waist instead of below. I get why, but that's always been a pet peeve of mine. Make no mistake, I really do like this combine mode. It looks great, and 85% of it is a blast to play with. But once again, it just smashes headfirst into its own hubris. These three sets have the same designer, and I'm glad they are able to really flex their creative muscles and do something we hadn't seen before at the time. A lot of what Constructicon Maximus does would go on to form the foundation of a lot of Constructicon sets later, and that influence cannot be understated. But this also feels like the set that got the least amount of attention, like their focus was sadly prioritized with the more pedestrian sets. I really do think this could have used a once-over, because as it stands, it's probably the weakest of the three sets from a pure quality perspective. But at the same time, it's easily the most interesting. Even amongst my journey into more creative ideas in wildly different eras of Transformers, this still stands out as something special. Out of all three Powerlinks combiners, this easily pushed the combiner concept the furthest. Much of what they did can be read on the combiners of the future, especially in the scooping members, torso, and limbs. And make no mistake, score aside, I do genuinely love this. Even after giving it some time to get out of the honeymoon phase, I still find myself enamored with the vibe it brings. Vibe can't do everything, but it can carve out a unique space in your collection. Maybe I'm just talking out of my ass, but as good as the others are, I'd rather have a janky but interesting combiner over one that's technically more sound, but significantly more boring. Maybe that's not the thoughts of the majority of people watching this. I know when I've brought this take up before, I've been crucified for it. But it's something I feel strongly about, and it is what endears me to this combiner specifically. Energon Constructicon Maximus is not a tough figure to recommend, but definitely a tough figure to pass. I'm really glad I don't review things the week I get them, maybe with a few exceptions. It takes time to really get to know what a figure is about, and especially with something covered as little as the awkward middle child of the Energon combiners, you really gotta dig deep to see the, not so much brilliance, but definitely the vibe underneath. Yeah, shout out to Arcneo Masato with like one of the only clear and concise videos on this lad that I keep referring back to and trying to figure certain things out. Without that, I'd honestly be lost. Buildron Maximus is a figure that pushes its combiner system to the absolute limit. None of the other combiner members do the crazy things this set does, not even the helicopter bros from Bruticus Maximus. And that does come with some limitations, particularly in the crane members, but also in minor areas such as the combined mode articulation. That's going to turn away some folks, especially since a lot of fans only see these as a vehicle for G1 representation, and since this beast actively rejects that, the pool grows even smaller. But if you're on the level this guy has, especially with its engineering, or you want to complete the Energon Combiner set on its terms, as opposed to some tacked-on upgrade set, this is well worth the purchase. Maybe not at the exorbitant Western prices, but if you can use a foreign freight forwarding proxy service, even outside the confines of the sponsorship, it's definitely worth the price. That or the Classics version, though I feel the G1 shift there just isn't to my taste, similarly to Revenge of the Fallen Bruticus, which I also plan to get to at some point. Constructicon Maximus might be the weakest of the three Energon combiners, but that's only by process of elimination. And after seeing these three back to back, yeah, the Unicron Trilogy team cooked with these. To be honest, I don't even need a modern update, not that they'd ever make one, but like, these all exist on their own terms, especially Constructicon Maximus, and that's something you don't often see these days. But as always, fandom public consciousness is a conversation, so drop your thoughts on this trio of behemoths below. Does this guy intrigue you, or are you still way more into the G1 fellows, and this seems completely pointless? After 2 videos on the Energon Combiners, have you been convinced of their brilliance? Or will you need a third to finally get you on board? Speaking of, yeah, at this point I'm probably just gonna bite the bullet and complete the trio of reviews. Should make a nice compilation video at the end too. Though this one won't be sponsored, as I already have the Superlink version from over half a decade ago. Speaking of, thank you once again to JPFans for making this review possible. Honestly, this whole nonsense still shocks me to this day. The fact I'm able to behold all 3 like this is astonishing, because this one was free, this one was free, and this one was dirt cheap, because I'm half sure the guy wasn't sober enough to realize it was the Superlink version. Boy, am I glad I don't drink. Sobriety aside, as always, remember, there's a context for everything. Till next time.
Beast with beacons of lore, castle crashing, button mashing, weaken its core.
Halfway beaten, leaking and sore, ain't seeking remorse. Can't discount what's in store. You blockbusters gon' get these combos blowing galore.
But wait, there's more in store. We ain't finished up. Hands glow, Shang Long float for the finisher.
Thought that would diminish.
Underworld still defending them.